Hi, I'm Donna Marie from Relish Cooking Studio, and today I'm going to show you how to roast squash. We were at the farm earlier today, and so we picked out some butternut squash, and that's the squash I'm going to use today to roast. When you're looking for a good squash, you really want to look for butternut anyways. You want to look for a squash that's got a nice beige coating or skin on the outside. Something that's fairly heavy for its weight, because that will indicate to you that it's a pretty good meaty squash. Some brown color on the outside, perhaps where it's been laying in the field, is fine, but what you want to avoid is any squash that has any punctures or bruises, because that can introduce bacteria and mold into the squash. So that's what you kind of want to avoid. So I'm going to start by getting the squash ready for roasting in the oven. Okay, so to get the squash ready for the oven, first we want to trim off the ends. You're going to need a good sharp knife that's heavy enough to get through the squash. So I'm going to use my chef's knife in order to be able to prepare it. So I'm going to start, I'll just sort of trim off the end, and then I'm going to cut right through the squash in half in order to cut it in half. Now, you can put your finger over the end in order to be able to sort of cut through it. I just made a cut there that wasn't quite even in half, so I'm going to just redo it. And now I'm going to push down on the squash and jiggle my knife through it so that I can get it split in half. There we go. Okay, so now I've got my knife cut in half, and you'll see in each half I have seeds. So I want to try and remove those seeds as much as possible. So I'm going to use a small paring knife just to sort of cut out the core, or cut out those seeds, the little pocket of seeds. And I'll use a spoon in order to help scrape them out and get rid of those. Okay, there's the seeds are gone. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper. It takes a couple of tries to get the seeds out. And then after I've got the seeds out, we're going to season it with some salt and pepper. Okay, so once you have the squash all cut and ready, including all of the seeds removed, we're just going to season it a little bit. So we're going to start first by brushing the squash with a little bit of olive oil. This is a cooking olive oil, one you can just generally cook with. So I'm going to brush it nicely with some all over the inside, including the little cavity, with the olive oil. And then we'll sprinkle it with a little bit of kosher salt, not a lot, just enough for seasoning, or not at all if you're not, if you don't want to salt your vegetables. And of course, a nice crack of black pepper afterwards too. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do to get the pieces ready for the oven. So once you've got your squash prepared and ready for the oven, we're going to place them on a sheet pan lined with some parchment paper. And once you've got them, rather than cooking them meat side up, we're going to flip them over and we're going to cook them flesh side down. That will enable the outside to get lightly browned, and we're going to get a beautiful caramelized finish on the inside, which is going to be even tastier. So by allowing them to cook flesh side down rather than flesh side up, it doesn't dry out the squash, and we get a much more in-depth flavor with the squash cooked this way. So the squash are going into the oven for about an hour at about 375 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So our squash has now finished baking in the oven. You can see it's got a beautiful golden crust on the outside. And if I take this and I turn it over, it's steaming hot and it's very tender on the inside as well too. It should be nice and soft, and I can get my fork or knife all the way through it. So now our squash is ready to eat, or we can use it to make squash soup, or toss it into other dishes that we might be using. So that's how you roast a squash.